some creepy facts you know. Story 1. In a strange and semi-creepy coincidence, Robert Lincoln, son of Abraham Lincoln, was saved from falling off a train platform and being run over by Edwin Booth, brother of John Wilkes Booth Edit. Well, I didn't expect me being a history guy to balloon my karma, but here I am, also spelling fixes. Story 2. So, for various grim reasons, Australia has a quite advanced, very knowledgeable specialist law enforcement unit dealing with online child essay imagery. They showed once this mummy blogger who considers herself a safe mommy blogger. She never ever shows her kids' faces. She never shows, like, any part of their bare bodies, not even their backs. She never shows them at the beach or in the pool, unless they're in those short t-shirt surf swimsuit thingies that cover them up from shoulder to knee and don't show their shape or body. She never shows them in bedclothes or anything you'd consider revealing or private moments. Most of her photos of her kids are just their hands, or taken from behind, or neck down, while the kids are fully dressed, like in jeans and coats, for safety and privacy. This unit approached her to show something, and they placed a tracking code in some of these photos, and within hours had tracked those photos. One of them was her 3 kids in heavy coats and woolly hats, on an autumn day, like these kids could be dolls. You can't see faces, body, shape, skin. You can barely see their hair under their hats. Those photos still ended up on pedo websites, with creepy comments by child abusers about how they like seeing kids dressed like that. Because they're not just turned on by revealing or inappropriate images of kids, they're attracted to children, and that means having these specific preferences. A covered-up child is just as attractive to them as a kid at the beach. Basically, there's no safe way to have images of your child online. But wait, it's worse. If you go to a lot of family bloggers' pages, they'll have parent-run pages for their underage children, sometimes as young as toddlers, where post solely content of the kids. It's just as way to have multiple pages as distinct revenue streams, but it's also something else. If you look at the follower stats of a lot of these pages, very often a majority of the followers, sometimes more than half, are adult men between 18 and 55. These pages will be like, this 3-year-old girl going to water parks, with lots of shots taken from the bottom of a slide as she slides down it, in her bathing costume, or playing in the pool, like these kids live in the pool. So yeah, Story 3 box. Jellyfish are not only the most venomous jellies to humans, but they also possess at least 24 functional eyes, of various degree, on its body despite having no centralized brain. 4 of its eyes always peer up out of the water, regardless of the animal's body position. Some eyes can make out images. Others are more primitive. Story 4. Your eyes have their own immune system that works separately from your body's immune system. If your body's immune system found out, it would attack your eyes. I read this here, and at my last eye appointment I asked if it was true. The eye doctor said, "Yeah, it's kinda weird," and I was like, "Kinda?" Story 5. One of the most common places to find a dead body is on the toilet. 'Cause when they're alive and not feeling well, the first thing they do is go to the toilet thinking it could be a bowel issue. Story 6. Drinking too much water can kill you. Some people who have survived drowning later die because of water intoxication. Solution is simple. Give them salt or electrolyte fluids to balance their sodium pH in the body. Story 7. Really just the fact that we can die or have our lives unimaginably ruined at any moment from a basically endless number of ways, and that eventually within a handful of decades, or maybe seconds, or any time in between, or so it is going to happen. Story 8. It's against the law for a pharmacist to tell seniors on Part D they are paying 5 times the cost for, let's say, metformin than someone off the street, doc-easy, no insurance. In my hypothetical transaction, the drug costs the pharmacy he charges $4. If grandma comes in, UWIs her Medicare card, she is charged $10 copay. The drug maker then takes $7, leaving $3 instead of $4 as the profit margin to the pharmacy. He is bound by law to say nothing about the scam. Story 9. When a star dies, it explodes and releases a gamma burst, and it destroys all in its path. If one goes off near Earth, it'll lead to extinction, and there's no warning because it happens immediately. Story 10. There are about 40 supervolcanoes in the world that have yet to erupt. One supervolcano is in Yellowstone National Park and has a magma chamber that is large enough to fit the entire city of Tokyo inside it. There's no indication we're due for a super eruption in our lifetime, but the thought it could happen still creeps me out. Story 11. During the merger of two black holes, a black holes can occasionally get ejected from the system and get shot out into open space and become a wandering black hole. The creepy part for me is that because a large part of the way in which we see black holes is through their interactions with their surroundings, we wouldn't really be able to see it coming towards us. Story 12. Herculaneum is better preserved than Pompeii. It just hasn't been excavated as much. Pompeii was essentially destroyed by falling volcanic rock, its dead later being buried by ash after rigor had set in. Herculaneum was destroyed by pyroclastic flows so hot that the liquids in people's bodies turned to vapor and exploded instantly. Brain matter turned into glass. Bone and metal were welded together. All that happened before Pompeii. Currently, the population in the area is so large that the Italian government is having a hard time deciding whether or not it's worth it to warn or evacuate them or not. Story 13. That in pharmaceutical labs, once they are done with the animals with whatever they were testing, the ones that are still alive are put down and thrown in a freezer. When the freezer is full, they are dumped in a furnace. Story 14. The only double hanging of women to be carried out in modern times was the execution of the Finchley baby farmers. Amelia Sack and Annie Walters would adopt unwanted babies for a fee. Then, supposedly, find homes for them. They did not find homes for the babies. https Onchao N Wikipedia org wiki Emilian Sash Ans Agnes Walters. Story 15. I was thoroughly disturbed when I read that tornadoes can happen in the middle of the night. It's not that I ever doubted that, but just the thought of a tornado at 3 a.m. terrifies me. Story 16. Back in the day, poor families would collect their urine so they could sell it to tanners. Hence, piens poor. If you were poorer than that, well, you didn't even have a pot to piens in. Story 17. Just after their Lubumai surrender, the Japanese government created a system of brothels in case American soldiers thought of taking out frustrations on Japanese women. After the rate of STIs shot up among American GIs, the Army made the Japanese government shut them down. The number of reported rapes went up by 800%. Take note that Japan is a very traditional society with plenty of stigma about reporting rape, so the actual numbers were probably even more horrific. Story 18. When salmon begin their famous spawning run, they shut down unnecessary systems so they can channel all of their energy into swimming upstream to mate. That includes the immune system, so spawning salmon are highly susceptible to disease and infection. They basically start to rot before they die. You can see many discolored salmon during their run, and there are even some missing pieces of their bodies. I read about this last year. We are recent transplants to the PNW, so this is all new to me. My daughter and I went to a nearby creek this week to see if the salmon were still doing their thing. Sure enough, we saw one swimming upstream with a big, gaping hole in its back, complete with visible flesh and stringy white things protruding from it. It was awful, but we couldn't look away either. She asked me not to cook salmon for dinner this week. It's one of my favorite meals, but yeah, I'm good for now. Story 19. Victorians collected and made art and jewelry from the hair of their loved ones. https watch www artsy. Net article artsy editorial curious. Victorian tradition making art human hair. Story 20. Some types of ice cream contain castoreum, which is from the anus of beavers. Also, carmine, a red food dye commonly used in food and makeup, is made of cochineal insects. Story 21. Not so much creepy, but if your wife or GF had a nut allergy, and if the male had eaten Brazil nuts before, it's the only nut Brazil nut that can cause an allergic reaction through. Story 22. Most of us are highly susceptible to suggestion when hypnotized, including attempts to instill false memories. Our brains cannot tell the difference between real and false memories. Imagine the possibilities. Story 23. Cats always land on their feet, and buttered bread always lands butter side down if you drop it. So if you strapped a piece of buttered bread to a cat's back and dropped the cat, you would have a perpetual motion machine that would be powerful enough to run a small monorail. Follow me for other inventions. Story 24. There are translucent microscopic spiders that live in the pores of your skin, usually on your face. They come out at night to feed on dead skin, then crawl back into your pores. Story 25. I believe around 5 to 10% of the ocean has been explored. We have the technology to study space, but it's not advanced enough to see what's down there, due to water pressure and darkness and stuff. Story 26. I was in a creative writing workshop in college and was critiquing a medieval torture section in someone else's piece. My professor was like, "What the? Why do you know that?" I told him I wrote a paper on it, but it actually came up in a few historical fiction books. I was curious if it was accurate and fell down a rabbit hole and know just a ton about medieval torture. I did the same a few months ago. It started with one false imprisonment case ages ago in France, but then sites suggest related articles, so I spent 4 hours reading about women being falsely imprisoned. Story 27. I had an ancestor in 1663, a high-posted bureaucrat, who paid a doctor called Ruby, under the pseudonym Oswald, to get some toxin to assassinate a relative of the Radziwill princes. Exactly 300 years before the assassination of a Radziwill in-law, President Kennedy. Story 28. When you have a kidney transplant, they don't remove your original organs, and the transplant does not go in the place of your old organ. Source. Have had 3 kidney transplants in my lifetime. I have a total of 5 kidneys in my body. Story 29. Falling down can kill you. Legit. If you hit her head on something sharp, most likely you're dead in the next second. Is not very creepy, but it makes me rethink life time to time LOL. Story 30. Your name is Mimi, you're 18, and live in the Philippines along with your sister who is 8. Your best friend Jill was having trouble with their boyfriend, and you tried to help but it wasn't working. All that from 2 minutes of work. Don't overshare online. Story 31. A lot of indigenous creepypastas or folklore have some sort of real-life tie to them, and the uncanny effect is so off-putting because we have been evolving to be afraid of anything that looks human and will hurt us. Story 32. Many types of gas don't smell naturally. It is added later for safety, so by theory there can happen a mistake. Another fun one, carbon dioxide is very toxic. So to run out of air is not your actual problem, but the toxins you produce is the actual problem, if you were buried alive per se. Story 33. Adolf Hitler's grandma served as a cleaning lady in a Jewish household, which implies that his mom might have been a half-Jewish illegitimate child. The uncertainty in this family secret Hitler could never get over. Plus his dad beat him regularly for no reason. These two things left him so scarred that, according to a psychoanalyst, he projected his fear and hatred towards his dad on the Jews, and his empathy towards his mother on Germany. Story 34. I don't know why I find this creepy, but our brain cannot create a new face. Every single person we see in our dreams is someone we have seen in real life before. Story 35. 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused. 1 in 5 boys are sexually abused. 70% of all caretakers over the age of 70 will die before the one they are caretaking. Not sure if these are creepy, but they are stats. I remember when I'm in a group of 4 women or 5 men. Also when I see an older person taking care of the aged spouse. Story 36. Your immune system can just decide that the rest of your body is offensive and goes on the attack. I have this with psoriasis, which started as flaky skin and now has become psoriatic arthritis, where my fingers, hands, and feet are unreliable because my body decided that my body is a foreign object. Fuck you, my body. Story 37. Google and Facebook, and formerly Twitter until a year ago, sell your data to everyone, attempt to curb and control your speech and behavior and knowledge, and then act like Apple is some sort of evil company that protects privacy, individual autonomy and agency, and right to a fantastic product for money spent. Story 38. There is a website called the Marshall Project, which from 2015 to 2021 recorded and counted down the time until execution of every death row inmate in the United States, categorized by state. It was accurate up to the second and had real-time updates about appeals, stays of execution, time of death, method of execution, etc. It was fascinating and gave me major creeps at the same time. The site is still up, and the records can still be read. Story 39. Sometimes if their diet is lacking protein, deer will actually search out birds' nests on forest floors, stamp the chicks, and then eat them. There's a type of bee called a vulture bee that feeds on decomposing flesh. They have wild-looking hives, and they will in fact make honey from the dead flesh. Honey that is referred to as meat honey. The honey is in fact edible according to researchers. Story 40. The only thing preventing you from dissolving your own stomach is a layer of mucus that pores in your stomach lining constantly secrete. If something happens to prevent them from working completely, your stomach will be dissolved within a couple of days. Story 41. Minor warning for those who have functional eyes. If you are sensitive, just scroll by. Some women cook and eat their placenta after birth. Has got to be the most horrific thing I know. There are even fucking recipes online. Story 42. Mummy brown, or Egyptian brown, is an old pigment that the pre-Raphaelites used for paintings. It's a rich color that was made from myrrh, pitch, and the decayed flesh of humans. Yup, mummies. Artists, for a very long time, did not know the contents of said pigment and were turned off by it by 1915 because they found it gross and despicable. Still, a plenty of famous works feature a paint that is essentially dried up human tissue. Story 43. Sloths have a taste for human waste. They can often be found in sewers or portable toilets or whatnot, just munching away on our poo. Not so much creepy, very much icky. Sorry if this comment ruined a love of sloths for anyone. https://www Science Alert. Calm in the Peruvian Amazon rainforest sloths. We're eating human poo. Story 44. If you removed all of the organic matter from a forest except the nematodes, you would still be able to see the shapes of the trees and everything else from the leftover nematodes that live on them. They are everywhere. Story 45. Not sure if considered creepy, but the ancient Romans went around collecting urine. It was big business. They used it to clean clothes as well as for mouthwash. Story 46. Media uses fear to push political agendas on both sides of the political spectrum. This fear is often used to demonize things that are not inherently dangerous simply by creating fear. For example, more people are killed by cows in a few weeks than sharks do in over 20 years, and toilets kill more people in a month than AR-15s do in years. This is not about what is being turned into fear, but rather what it can be used for. Movies, TV, and social media are extremely powerful tools as the human mind can be easily manipulated from enough exposure. Furthermore, history and even simple logic can be rewritten just by changing a few Google search results and changing the contents of textbooks. Even just removing a scene from a movie can wipe all knowledge of it from existence. Simply by changing a source of information and not saying anything about it to anyone can rewrite everyone's knowledge. TLDR. The human mind is extremely manipulatable. Anything you know could be a lie, and you wouldn't know it. Story 47. Aquagenic urticaria is the name for an allergy to water. Obviously, water is a requirement to sustain life, and so people with this allergy must be careful with even drinking it, because in more severe cases, the person may go into anaphylaxis from the water coming into contact with their lips. Story 48. Not 100% sure this is fact, but if you overdose on paracetamol, you will steadily feel worse and worse until you don't and feel much better you think you might live. Actually, you won't. Your liver just failed and you're about to die. Story 49. If something dies, for a few hours the last thing they saw will be burned into their eyes. It's not detailed enough to find where it was last alive, though. Story 50, not exactly a fact, but the disappearance/murder murder of Emanuela Orlandi. She was a Vatican girl who went missing in June of 1983 and was kidnapped by a group of people whose motive was to get one of their accomplices out of prison, who was in for shooting the Pope, using Emanuela to blackmail the Vatican. They kept her imprisoned for days and days and even released recordings to her family of her speaking to them, and unfortunately, another recording which contained an audio of Emanuela being raped. There were some speculations that it wasn't actually her in the recording and they just used it to scare her family. But Emanuela was never found, and there were never any remains of any sort belonging to her found. The group of people released false information about her to the public, which led to a lot of pointless searches. But Emanuela is most likely dead. There are rumors that the Vatican knows exactly what happened to her, as it was confirmed that one of the crucial members of the Vatican molested Emanuela, which was found out after one of Emanuela's old friends came forward to tell more of her story. She would be 55 years old if she was alive today. Story 51. During the embalming process in a funeral home, internal organs are sucked out and replaced with embalming fluid. The organs that are sucked out go right into the sewer system. So not only are dead people's organ bits in the sewers, but so too are any medications they were on, diseases they had, etc. Kind of a head-scratcher when you go to a hospital or doctor's office and see the biohazard waste bins. Yet a funeral home, which process a higher volume of biohazard waste, has no such disposal protocols. Story 52. A friend of mine once confessed that he used to play a game with his girlfriend. The game was simple. He would insert a few Haribo sweets in her vagina and fish them out with his tongue. After a few days, he developed something around his mouth. When he went to the doctor about it, it turned out that one of the Haribos was in fact a genital wart. He then said, "Don't tell anyone." Story 53. You know that nice fluffy soft bread on the supermarket shelves? They stay fresh way longer than normal baked bread. The secret ingredient is human hair. Story 54. I have none. So how about a theory instead? You know how doctors say sleep paralysis is harmless? What if people who die in their sleep were actually killed by their so-called sleep demon? Story 55. My dad is a retired EMT, paramedic, firefighter. Years ago, he told me about a guy in cardiac arrest that they brought back to life. The guy ended up coming by the station a few weeks later to thank my dad personally because he had heard, while dead, someone say it was time to call it, but my dad said to keep trying. That story has terrified me. To know you're dead, but not quite dead, and hear other people call it before you're fully gone. Jesus, no thank you. Story 56. I can believe this. I went with my girlfriend to visit her gran in hospice on what turned out to be the day before her gran died. During the visit, my girlfriend went to the loo, and I wasn't sure to do say as her gran was essentially comatose. I didn't want to be rude and look at my phone, so I just spoke to her and told her about me as we'd never met. I told her I planned to propose to her granddaughter, and she 100% reacted. Her eyes fluttered, and I think she wanted to try say something or get a look at this person saying this. She never had the strength, unfortunately, but I didn't expect a reaction and got a fright when she suddenly stirred like that. Story 57. I'm a nurse. I'm often with people in their final moments. I always make a point of trying to say comforting things as they go. IDK if anyone hears me or if it matters, but I've always felt it was important that somebody was being gentle with them as they passed. It's part of the reason I get irritated with coworkers when they make rude comments during codes. Story 58. I can believe this. I started going into organ failure and the docs were preparing my family for the worst. I could hear it all but couldn't open my eyes or respond to tell them not to give up on me. Story 59. And this is what keeps me up at night. 3 years ago, my mother passed away, and I was the one to tell the doctors to cease efforts to revive her. Her health had been in decline for a few years, and this was in the middle of COVID, so I couldn't really imagine her being on a vent in the middle of such a confusing time. I wonder if she heard me say, "No, let her go, she's had enough." Was she joyful that she would no longer be in pain, or did she wonder why her only son would do this to her? I think about this a lot. I'm thinking about it now. Story 60. One of my teachers told us a story about how he was supervising a game of some kind cricket when he got hit on the head by cricket ball. Those little bastards are like the bludgers from Quidditch, hard as and able to shatter bones. The teacher got knocked down and started passing out. As he lost all his senses, the last thing he was someone shouting, "Oh my God, Daniel, you killed the teacher." Story 61. I'm an audiologist, and how could this possibly be measured and what does it even mean? Just because neural activity is measured from the cochlea certainly does not mean that anything is reaching the brain or that there is any cerebral activity. Story 62. We have a married couple who are family friends, and last year the husband had a heart attack at a pharmacy, 100% blockage. A cardiologist of all things just happened to be in line with him when he collapsed and kept him alive while the EMTs arrived. The husband described being able to hear the paramedics in the ambulance as they used the defibrillators on his stopped heart, and he had a sense that he was dying. He survived the ride to the hospital and is now 100% dependent on a pacemaker, but he's still alive.